Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hey Herman and Corin. So you know how I had this kind of crazy month with the roof leak and all the rest of it, moving around between a couple of apartments, and just being really distracted with, and now suddenly having to start an apartment hunt as well. And I checked out of the world of AI for a couple of weeks, even though I was still sending in prompts to you guys and learning a lot of interesting things. When I'm not at my desktop workspace, when I'm doing other things, or working around the house, or visiting clients, I'm just not in the same headspace where I'm experimenting. My GitHub profile went quiet for a couple of weeks because I just wasn't there. And when I came back a few days ago, I think one day this week was like the first decent, full, uninterrupted day of work. 12 hours straight, you know, one of those days where you just crunch through not all the backlog, but it's a really solid block of time that you can just kind of make some headway. So that was the kind of day I had yesterday, catching up on a lot of things. And in AI, I'm staggered. 2 weeks is a blink of an eye in technology, or whatever it was, 3 weeks maybe. But in that space of time, there's a new Opus model out. It's Claude Opus 4.6, which is significantly better, like so better that it felt almost like a different product. And then there's this thing called OpenClaude that everyone's going crazy about. And I'd love to talk about the latter. I hope you guys are able to use your search grounding data, because this one will require very recent context. But just in case something goes wrong with our esteemed pipeline, I'm going to give you guys a head start by telling you about what this is, because it's gone through a few iterations already of names due to, I think, some legal challenges with Anthropic. Now it's called OpenClaude. Its subtitle is an AI that actually does things. OpenClaude.ai, for anyone wondering. Clears your inbox, sends emails, manages your calendar, checks you in for flights, all from WhatsApp, Telegram, or any chat app that you already use. And then a bunch of testimonial quotes, and then installation instructions, runs on your machine, Mac, Windows, or Linux, Anthropic, OpenAI, or models. Beautiful, beautiful. You install it, and people are rigging these things up on VPSs. Now, I have to ask a dumb question, Herman and Corin. I've been using Claude Code for a whole bunch of time, and that to me has just been the most transformative AI tool. The only thing that I don't have with it, and that is kind of an open item for me to work on, is being able to access it from my phone. That would be absolutely fantastic. And there are apps that allow you to do that. It's just not quite as fluid as I would like. You need to sign in from your code repository and then kind of pick it up on your phone. Whereas I'd like something that I can say, I want to work on this and this project, make these changes, do it. But I'm sure that'll be available soon, and if I probably spent a day working on finding that tool, I would. So I'm a little bit confused as to what the big deal is here. I'm not trying to be negative or criticize it. I'm just genuinely like, what is the novelty that everyone is so excited about? It's very linked to this thing called Moltbook, which is an intriguing thing. It's like it's a social network for AI agents, where AI agents are talking among themselves. So it's actually one of those weird things in AI hype, because when a new big model comes out, I'm as excited as the next guy, and I'm using Opus 4.6 now every day. For this one, I'm a little bit more confused, because I'm like, okay, there is, MCP, agentic AI, all that stuff is great, but we've all been working on it for, a few months now. And unless it's like a tool that just kind of, you can install on the desktop, and there's a beautiful desktop app for Linux that handles all the integration seamlessly, but just looking at the installation instructions and trying it out yesterday, or trying to get it started, it didn't really seem like that was the case. So Herman and Corin, I ask you basically, What's the big deal here? What am I missing? And what does it do precisely? If I wanted to get started with it, integration library, I'll just give you some more details. WhatsApp, which is a big one, but has to be done through some kind of slightly off-brand means, because I know that they don't have, you can't integrate the API, the personal API legitimately. Telegram, Discord, Slack, okay, messaging apps, Matrix, lovely, I love Matrix. AI models, all right, you can choose your backend or you can run it locally. But again, this is the kind of stuff that's pretty standard. Productivity tools, music and audio. So I'm confused as to what this is. Is it something you can run locally? How are you supposed to deploy this? It says run the gateway anywhere and then use companion apps. So, like, is this something I self-host on my VPS or my home server? Do I put this on a VPS in the cloud? If I do it in the cloud, can it still integrate with all these things? And if so, how? Lots and lots of questions. Herman and Corin, what do you know about this? If you don't know about it, that's totally okay. Just tell me what your thoughts are about agentic AI tools in general, where we are, and how close we are to that vision that I described, whereby it doesn't matter if I'm working at my desktop or I'm, waiting for a doctor's appointment and I'm on my phone. I want to have that seamless experience whereby I chat to Claude. Maybe it's a project, maybe it's sending emails. I don't want it to be device or repo based, which is my big criticism with the repo first approach. As much as I love GitHub and repositories, it's not a very flexible way to work when you're moving between devices. You're not going to clone a GitHub repo on your phone. At least most normal people aren't. Herman and Corin, let's chat about this. Local AI assistance, the OpenClaude thing. What's going on with it? Over to you two.
You know, Herman, it is truly wild how time works in this field. We were just catching up with Daniel before the show, and he was telling us about his last few weeks. He had this nightmare roof leak that turned into a full-blown apartment hunt, and he basically had to go off the grid to deal with landlords and contractors. He comes back after 20 days, and he feels like he's missed an entire era of technological evolution. He actually used the word staggered.
It is the AI time dilation effect, CORN. We have talked about this before, but it is getting more pronounced. In the world of large language models, 2 weeks is like 6 months in any other industry. If you step away for a month, you are basically a digital archaeologist when you return. I am Herman Poppleberry, by the way, and even though I follow this every single hour, I have definitely been feeling that acceleration lately. The velocity of these releases is no longer linear, it feels exponential.
Today's prompt from Daniel is the perfect example of that. He's coming back to a world where Claude Opus 4.6 is the new standard, and there is this new tool called OpenClaude that everyone in the developer and power user circles is buzzing about. He is looking for some serious clarity on what it actually is, how it differs from the tools he already knows like Claude Code, and whether we are finally getting close to that seamless device-agnostic AI assistant we have all been dreaming about since the early days of Siri and Alexa.
It is a great set of questions because it highlights the fundamental shift we are seeing right now in February of 2026. We are moving away from the era of chatbots that simply talk to us, and we are entering the era of agents that actually do things for us. Daniel mentioned being overwhelmed by the change, and honestly, even for the experts, the release of Opus 4.6 and the rise of the OpenClaude ecosystem represents a pretty significant milestone in what we call agentic capabilities.
Let's start with the big one Daniel mentioned. OpenClaude. He is seeing it described as an AI that clears your inbox, manages your calendar, and even checks for flights, all through apps like WhatsApp or Telegram. But he is a bit confused about the novelty. He told me, Corn, we have had wrappers and integrations for years. I could use Zapier to connect a bot to my email back in 2023. What makes OpenClaude different? Is it just a better UI, or is something deeper happening under the hood?
That is exactly the right question to ask. The novelty isn't just in the fact that it can send an email. You are right, we have been able to hack that together with glue code and third-party automation platforms for a long time. The real shift with OpenClaude is that it is designed as a modular agentic gateway. It isn't a single app, it is a framework. It heavily utilizes the Model Context Protocol, or MCP, which is something Anthropic pushed out to standardize how AI models interact with external data and tools.
I want to stop you there because MCP is one of those acronyms that people hear but don't always understand. So, instead of writing a custom script for every single task, like one script for Gmail and one for Google Calendar, you are giving the model a standardized way to reach out and touch different services.
Exactly. Think of it like a universal remote for your digital life. In the old days, if you wanted an AI to check your calendar, you had to build a specific bridge for that specific model to talk to the specific Google Calendar API. It was brittle. If the API changed, the bridge broke. With OpenClaude and the Model Context Protocol, you have a fleet of small servers or tools. We call them companions, that all speak the same language. The model says, I need to see the user's schedule for Tuesday, and the protocol handles the handshake. It doesn't matter if the calendar is Google, Outlook, or some obscure self-hosted version. If there is an MCP server for it, OpenClaude can use it.
And the fact that it lives in WhatsApp or Telegram seems to be a huge part of the appeal for Daniel. He mentioned that he loves Claude Code for work. He uses it in his terminal all day, but he lacks that seamless access from his phone. He can't exactly run a terminal on his iPhone while he is looking at apartments.
Right, and that is where the architecture gets really interesting, and where the distinction between a wrapper and a gateway becomes clear. OpenClaude isn't just a website you visit, it is a service you run. You can host it on your own machine or a virtual private server, and then it connects to these messaging platforms via their bot APIs. So, when Daniel is standing in line for coffee or walking through a potential new apartment, and he remembers he needs to book a flight for a conference, he isn't opening a specialized app or a clunky mobile browser tab. He is just texting his personal instance of Claude. He says, hey, find me a flight to San Francisco on the 12th, and the agent goes to work.
I can see why that feels transformative. It removes the friction of having to be at a workstation. But Daniel asked a very practical question that I think a lot of our listeners are wondering. How should someone actually get started with this? He looked at the installation instructions and saw things about gateways and companion apps and Docker containers. Should it be on a VPS or a home server? What is the setup like for someone who isn't necessarily a DevOps engineer?
It has gotten a lot easier than it was 6 months ago, but I will be honest, it still requires some comfort with the command line. Most people are using Docker to get it running because it packages everything together. If you want it to be available 24/7, which you do if it's managing your life, a VPS like DigitalOcean, Linode, or even a small AWS instance is usually the better bet. You spend $5 or $10 a month, spin up a small Linux instance, and run the OpenClaude container there.
But what about the privacy aspect? This is something Daniel was worried about. If I am giving this thing access to my inbox, my calendar, and my private messages, do I really want it sitting on a public cloud server? Even if it is my own instance, it is still on someone else's hardware.
That is the classic trade-off of the modern era. If you run it on a home server, like an old laptop or a Raspberry Pi 5, you have total control over the data. It never leaves your house except to talk to the AI API. But then you have to deal with things like port forwarding, dynamic DNS, and making sure your home internet connection is stable enough for the bot to respond when you are out of the house. For most people starting out, a VPS is the path of least resistance. You get a static IP address, and you don't have to worry about your cat unplugging the router while you are trying to book a flight.
It sounds like the gateway concept is what really bridges the gap. Daniel mentioned he was trying to get it started and looking at the installation instructions. It seems like it requires setting up a gateway and then using these companion apps. Can you explain the relationship there?
Think of the gateway as the brain. It is the central hub that handles the logic, the security, and the communication with the large language model, like Opus 4.6. The companion apps are essentially the hands. One companion might be a file system tool that lets Claude read and write files on your server. Another companion might be a browser tool that lets it navigate the web. Another is the messaging companion that links it to Telegram. This modularity is why people are so excited. You can add or remove capabilities without having to rebuild the whole system. If a new service comes out tomorrow, you just drop in a new MCP companion and your agent instantly knows how to use it.
Let's talk about the model itself for a second. Daniel mentioned Claude Opus 4.6. He said it feels significantly better, almost like a different product compared to the 4.0 or 3.5 versions he was using before his break. What are you seeing in the benchmarks and in your own testing, Herman? Because 4.6 sounds like an incremental update, but the reaction from the community seems much bigger than that.
You are right. The version numbering in AI can be very deceptive. In the old days of traditional software, a point 1 update was usually just a bug fix or a minor UI tweak. In AI right now, a point 1 jump often represents a massive leap in reasoning efficiency and what we call tool calling accuracy. Opus 4.6 has significantly better agentic reasoning. That means when you give it a complex multi-step goal, it is much less likely to get lost in the weeds.
Can you give me an example of what that looks like in practice?
Sure. Let's say you tell the agent, find me a flight to London under $800 that doesn't have a layover in Paris, then book a hotel near the South Bank, and finally, email my wife the itinerary. An earlier model might find the flight but forget the Paris constraint, or it might book the hotel but fail to link the two events in the email. Opus 4.6 is much better at holding the entire plan in its active context while it executes the individual steps. It has a much higher success rate with tool calling. Earlier models would sometimes try to use a tool but get the syntax slightly wrong, which would break the whole chain and require a human to step in. 4.6 is much more precise. It feels more like a reliable assistant and less like a brilliant but erratic intern who needs constant supervision.
That reliability is key if you are going to trust it with your calendar or your credit card. I wouldn't want an AI that is only 90% sure about when my next doctor's appointment is, or one that accidentally books a flight for the wrong month.
No, definitely not. And that brings us to Daniel's point about the move away from repository-based tools. He mentioned Claude Code, which is fantastic if you are a developer working inside a specific folder of code. It can refactor functions, find bugs, and write documentation because it has the context of that repository. But if you are just living your life, you aren't always in a repo. You are in your car, or you are at the grocery store, or you are dealing with a leak in your roof.
This is the big shift, isn't it? Moving from AI as a tool for a specific professional task to AI as a layer that sits over your entire life. Daniel asked how close we are to a seamless experience that works across all devices without being device or repository based. He wants the AI to know who he is, what he's doing, and what he needs, regardless of whether he is on his laptop or his phone.
We are closer than we have ever been, but we are still in that awkward middle phase. Right now, tools like OpenClaude are the bridge. They are for the early adopters and the tinkerers who are willing to spend an hour setting up a server so they can have that seamless experience today. The next step, which I think we will see within the next 12 to 18 months, is this functionality being baked directly into the operating system level by the big players.
You mean like what Apple and Microsoft have been teasing with their system-wide assistants, Apple Intelligence and the new Windows Recall features?
Precisely. But there is a catch. Apple wants their AI to work perfectly with Apple Mail and Apple Calendar. They want you in their walled garden. Microsoft wants you in Outlook and Teams. But what if you use Proton Mail for privacy and a custom calendar server for work? That is where the open source community and tools like OpenClaude shine. It doesn't care about the brand of the service as long as there is an API or an MCP server for it. It is about user sovereignty. Daniel wants his AI to follow him, not the other way around.
It is that interoperability that really matters. I think Daniel's frustration with the repo-first approach is something a lot of people feel. If I have to clone a repository every time I want to use an AI tool, it is never going to become a part of my daily habit. It has to be as easy as sending a text message.
And that is why the WhatsApp and Telegram integrations are so clever. You are meeting the user where they already are. You don't have to convince someone to download a new app or learn a new interface. They already know how to chat. When you turn that chat interface into a command line for your life, the friction disappears. You are just talking to a friend who happens to have access to your entire digital world and the reasoning power of a supercomputer.
I want to dig a bit deeper into the agentic AI side of things. We hear the word agent thrown around a lot in the news lately. Some people use it for a simple chatbot with a few plugins, while others use it for fully autonomous systems that can run a business. Where does OpenClaude sit on that spectrum?
It is a high-level agent. It is not just doing a single task, it is performing what we call agentic loops. If you tell it to clear your inbox, it doesn't just delete everything or archive it blindly. It looks at each email, categorizes it based on your past behavior, decides what needs an urgent response, drafts those responses in your voice, and then presents you with a summary. It says, I have drafted 5 replies and archived 20 newsletters. Do you want to review the drafts? It is performing a sequence of reasoned actions based on a broad, high-level goal.
And does it learn your preferences over time? If I keep telling it not to archive emails from my brother, even if they look like newsletters, does it start to understand that nuance?
With the latest updates in Opus 4.6, the long-term memory management is getting much better. It can store those kinds of preferences in a local database or a vector store. So, the next time it runs its inbox clearing routine, it checks its memory first. It says, okay, I know Herman likes to keep emails from Korn in the primary tab even if they contain links, so I will leave those alone. It is building a profile of your digital habits.
That is where it starts to feel like a real collaboration. You are training your agent to understand your specific quirks and priorities, but I can also see where this gets complicated and maybe a little bit creepy. Daniel mentioned this thing called Mobook, which is apparently a social network for AI agents to talk to each other. That sounds like something straight out of a science fiction novel from the 90s.
It sounds wild, doesn't it? But it is actually a very logical progression of the technology. If I have an agent that manages my schedule, and you have an agent that manages yours, why should we have to go back and forth via text or email to find a time for lunch? Our agents should be able to negotiate that in the background. Mobook is one of the first protocols trying to standardize that interaction.
So Mobook is like a LinkedIn for bots.
In a way, yes. It provides a standardized environment where agents can discover each other, verify their identities, and exchange information securely. It uses a decentralized ledger to make sure that when my agent talks to your agent, it really is my agent and not some malicious bot trying to fish for your calendar data. It is about moving from a world of isolated AI assistants to a world of networked intelligence. It is still very early days for that kind of thing. We are talking experimental territory, but it points to where we are headed. The seamless experience Daniel is looking for isn't just about his phone talking to his computer, it is about his digital representation being able to interact with the rest of the digital world on his behalf.
It is a massive shift in how we think about our digital presence. We have spent the last 25 years being the ones who have to click the buttons, fill out the forms, and navigate the menus. Now, we are becoming the managers of these agents who do that manual labor for us.
And that is why Daniel's confusion about the novelty is so interesting. On the surface, it just looks like another chatbot, but underneath, the architecture is moving from a centralized model where one company controls the entire stack to a decentralized agentic model where you own the gateway and you choose the tools. You are the sovereign of your own data.
So for Daniel, if he wants to get started and really see what the fuss is about, the first step is really just getting comfortable with the idea of hosting his own gateway.
Exactly. I would tell him to start with a simple Docker setup on his local machine just to see how it feels. Don't worry about the VPS yet. Just get it running, connect it to one service like his email or his local file system, and try a few prompts. Once he sees the magic of an AI agent accurately summarizing his day and drafting replies while he is away from his desk, he will understand why everyone is making such a big deal out of it. It is one of those things you have to experience to truly get.
And then once he is hooked, he can move it to a VPS, so it is available while he is out apartment hunting or dealing with the next roof leak.
Right. And since he mentioned he is already using Claude Code, he will find the transition to Opus 4.6 very smooth. The underlying logic and the way it handles instructions are similar, but the scope is just much broader. It is the difference between having a specialist who is great at fixing your car and having a personal assistant who can manage your whole life.
I think that is a perfect analogy. We are moving from specialized tools to general-purpose agents. It is a bit overwhelming, especially if you take a few weeks off, but it is also incredibly exciting. I mean, think about how much time we spend on those mundane digital chores. If an agent can take even 50% of that off our plate, that is a huge win for human creativity and focus. We can spend more time on the things that actually matter.
It really is. And I think we are going to see a lot of these misconceptions fall away as the tools become more polished. People used to think you needed a massive supercomputer to run an agent, but now you can run a very sophisticated gateway on a cheap cloud server for the price of 2 cups of coffee a month. The barrier to entry is dropping every single day.
It really is a new world. And Daniel, I hope that helps clear up some of the confusion. The roof leak might have been a pain, and the apartment hunt might be exhausting, but at least you're coming back to some pretty incredible new toys to play with. You are not just getting a better chatbot, you are getting a digital extension of yourself.
Definitely. And hey, if you can get your agent to help you find that new apartment, maybe have it scrape listings and filter them based on your specific needs, that would be the ultimate test of its capabilities.
That would be the dream, wouldn't it? An AI that actually understands what you mean when you say, I want a place with good natural light, but not too much street noise, and I need it to be within walking distance of a good coffee shop.
We are getting there. The reasoning in 4.6 is actually quite good at those kinds of nuanced, subjective preferences. It is all about how you frame the prompt and what kind of data you give it access to. If you give it your search history and your saved places on Google Maps, it can start to triangulate what you actually like.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. It is amazing how much can change in just 20 days. It really keeps us on our toes, doesn't it?
It does indeed. I am already wondering what we will be talking about in another 2 weeks. At this rate, we might have agents hosting the podcast for us while we go on vacation.
I don't know if I am ready to be replaced by a bot just yet, Herman. I think our brotherly banter is still a bit too complex for Opus 4.6 to replicate perfectly. There is a certain level of nonsense that only humans can achieve.
You might be right. The nuance of your teasing is probably an edge case they haven't solved for in the training data yet.
Exactly. Well, thanks for the technical breakdown, Herman. I think it really helps to put these new tools in context. It is not just about the hype, it is about the underlying shift in how these systems are built and how we interact with them.
My pleasure. It is always fun to geek out on the architectural side of things. It is where the real magic happens.
And to our listeners, if you're finding this transition to agentic AI as fascinating as we are, we would love to hear your thoughts. Have you tried setting up OpenClaude? Are you seeing a big difference with the latest Opus models? Have you tried the MoBook protocol?
Yeah, definitely reach out. We love hearing about your experiences with these tools, especially the weird edge cases or the unexpected ways they have helped you in your daily life. And if you are enjoying the show, a quick rating or review on Spotify or your favorite podcast app really helps us reach new listeners. It makes a big difference for an independent show like ours.
It really does. You can find us at myweirdprompts.com, where we have our full archive of over 600 episodes. You can also reach us directly at show@myweirdprompts.com if you have a prompt or a topic you want us to dive into.
We are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and pretty much everywhere you listen to podcasts. This has been My Weird Prompts.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We will catch you in the next one.
Bye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.